live, one of the things with the resume that I would say is important is you keep it 1 page long, because your resume is pretty much supposed to communicate who you are as a candidate. And so what you want to do is have that resume communicate it as effectively as possible.
But two things here: 1 page long, one line long too for your
For your
bullet
bullet
points.
points,
Yeah.
because what you want is every bullet point to communicate your experience effectively. Because if you could have all the experience in the world, but if your experience isn't effectively if your resume isn't effectively communicating the experience, you may get passed up by somebody who is less qualified than you.
Yeah, think about it this way: you have 100% of the skills that the company's looking for, but you only share 50% of your skills. The company's going to think that you only have 50% of the skills that are
Right.
needed for the role. But somebody who has 80% of the skills and communicates all 80% of those skills, the company's going to perceive them as having more skills, even because they're showing more skills than what you are showing.
So the key here is that the resume, so important. Did you ever have a resume more than 1 page?
No, I kept it to 1 page.
Same,
Yeah,
1 page.
kept it to 1 page. And here's the thing: like, as you use it to get experience, and as you get more experience, you trim things that are on your resume if you need to at some point. I think we were making a video about this earlier, and in the like podcast format, was that when ultimately we've had a lot of bullet points for our student organizations, but as we started getting more and more internships, those student organizations started having smaller bullet points to the point where they were just like one line, because our internships were
Right.
taking up so much of the resume.
So to give an example, like after having worked like multiple of the internships, um, I had basically maybe 4 or 5 different on-campus involvement activities on my resume, and then for each one had maybe like 2 or 3 bullet points under each experience. But then once I had multiple internships, the bullet points ended up for those different on-campus involvement activities ended up just being taken off the resume to make room for the internships. But so we have a couple questions. One is the first one was how to pick your major. So my advice is pretty much pick the major that aligns well with your goals and your interests. You don't really want to pick the wrong major for the wrong reasons. I know you studied. So I studied electrical. The reason I went into electrical was because I took the AP Physics C class, basically the Physics 2, thank you for the likes, electricity and magnetism class, and then basically liked that and decided electrical engineering would be the best path for me to learn more about that. I know, Mike, you wanted to study or thought about studying electrical.
Yeah, we had a first year engineering program, and heading into that program, I was like, I really want to study electrical. And actually, what you do is you kind of take like general classes during your freshman year, and you start taking like your major specific classes
Right.
sophomore year. I was like, I am so set on studying electrical engineering that I wanted to take them like a second semester freshman year, do a little early. But I didn't do that. And actually, through FYE, talking with other people, looking at my goals, what I wanted to do, chose to do industrial engineering during the second semester of my freshman year. And I was like, I actually changed from me thinking that EE was the number one thing for me, changed to IE. Basically, for me, it was looking at the courses. There were a few EE courses I thought were interesting, but going through the whole curriculum, I was like, majority of it, I don't see a big passion and connection for me for this. Plus, I don't think it's going to be particularly helpful for getting the jobs that I was looking to get.
Gotcha.
Oh yeah, plus too, the for industrial engineering, like towards the pros of it, why I was drawn to it, systems thinking, a lot of different things going on together, and basically taking a bunch of different parts and putting them all together, one system, I thought was super cool.
Yep. I think should probably move on to the next question because we got a lot of questions rolling in. One was, what should you do over the summer if you don't have an internship? And this is important because, and thank you for the likes, for basically working an internship. If you are trying to get a good job after graduation, one of the gold standard experiences that you can have is an internship. That's like the best thing you can have if you're looking for a full-time job. Number one, because it is directly related not directly, but it's very, very closely related to the work you could be doing after graduation. But then also your internship can literally, at the end of the internship, they could say, hey, we loved working with you. Let's give you an offer to join full time. And so imagine this, you're working during the summer before senior year, and then all of a sudden, and like a couple weeks before senior year starts, you literally are given a full-time job offer. And so you already know during the final two, you have already accepted an offer before the final 2 semesters of your degree even start. So that's benefit of the internship. But basically, what can you do?
There's other things to
don't
do
have
too
an
if you don't have an internship. I mean, we've talked about this part-time job, showing that different responsibilities are like a summer job, having responsibilities, being trusted by an employer, taking on, working on a team, being able to have that. Those are stuff that could be valuable to talk about in internship interviews if your ultimate goal is to try to get an internship, because we think internships like gold standard for engineering for like summer experience. But ultimately that depends on what you want to do. But if you're interested in going into industry, right, like that, it kind of makes sense to try and find internships. The other thing too, we talk about summer jobs, but we also talk about personal projects, research experience, summer courses. I think like the main idea is to just like think about it as pre-summer, post-summer. Are you growing during that summer experience?
Right. So the main thing is like if during your summer, the goal would be go back to school in the fall, more qualified with more experiences on your resume than you left in the spring. And so thank you for the likes. So the basic thing would be either get more skills, get more experience. You can do that with part-time job, like you said, personal projects, take a free course online to learn a new skill. You could even take a class, for example. If you are, let's say you're getting a business minor, okay? That's something that I was doing. And one of the classes I had to take was macroeconomics, I believe, or like an accounting class. And I remember I took just online at a local community college during the winter breaks. During one of the winter breaks, I believe I took one of the accounting classes and just knocked that out of the way there.
Yeah, I also took an accounting class over the summer.
That's another thing you can do over the summer to just show that you were using your summer productively. I think one of the questions we had earlier was, when did you get your first internship? So both of us had our first internship the summer right after freshman year.
You want to talk about when you got yours?
And so, so for me, I believe we both had 2 offers freshman year. So for me, the first offer I got was through the on-campus career fair in about September-ish. And so on-campus career fairs are basically events on campus where companies show up and they have tables set up, and you can approach each table or each company and talk to them about getting like an internship. It's a very high level. And you've asked this question a couple times, so I'll just answer it now about whether deciding to do the FE if you study EE. So I would say it depends on what your long-term goals are. So whether, I'm going to keep it high level because I think the FE, PE applies to several other majors. Really what the decision you make for either like your major or like if you are stuck deciding between 2 internships. So any type of decision you're trying to make, like I said, your major, 2 internships, does it align well with my goals? Does it kind of place me in a position where, does it help me advance towards my goal or allow me to sort of take the next stepping stone towards my goal? I think that's kind of the general approach I have towards that, like giving high level advice, because like kind of how you talked about with industrial engineering, going from maybe thinking of studying electrical and then actually studying industrial, which is basically going from what's considered one of the hardest majors to what's considered one of the more easy majors. Even though I think all of the engineerings are difficult, I would say that you chose what aligns well with your interests and your goals, which you're very, very good. He's really, really good at math. He's very, very, very good at math and very sharp. You're doing what aligns well with your goals. And industrial engineering has a lot of math. So what I would say is that, what were we talking about? We were talking about internships when we got our first internship. So yeah, my first internship offer came in September of freshman year, and that was through the career fair on campus. Long story short, I ended up not accepting that offer. I turned it down. I could go into that, but I talk a lot, so I'll zip it there and say I did not accept that offer. And then spent the rest of basically freshman year trying to get an offer. And that next offer, which was from John Deere, that was the first internship I worked. I got that through applying online.
Yeah, for my internship offers, both came from career fairs. Fall career fair freshman year, that was about like a Fortune 100 company, Fortune 500 company, and then spring semester, spring career fair, Fortune 100 company. Worked internship after freshman year, and then got offers sophomore year. But in terms of the timing of our internship offers, both came for both of us, fall semester and spring semester.
Yep. And so I would say that there's another question here about working an industrial engineering internship as a Mechie. I would say that generally speaking, any internship is better than no internship. And then on the topic of doing like an industrial engineering internship, I would say that it depends on what you're doing, because industrial engineering students could go into like supply chain roles, which are also positions that mechanical engineering students go into.
Yeah, but if you have I think like this comes down to like conceptually, if you have an internship in a field that's unrelated to your major and you're uncertain about whether or not you want to do it, one of the ways to look at it is you're getting experience in this field. Do you like it or not? And perhaps this is going to be an interesting field that you really like. Maybe you're a mechanical engineer and you really like an industrial engineering oriented position that might be more supply chain or logistics oriented, something along those lines. And then you find out a new career path that you might be interested in pursuing going forward. Mm-hmm. If you don't like it, then you kind of know, okay, I really want to focus, like what didn't you like about it? And what do you want to focus on? And so if you're if you're taking an internship and you're unsure about whether or not you're going to like the role or the field, try to like approach. My advice would be, or rather the way that I had approached it during my internships, was approach it with an open mind and see, is this something that you can see yourself doing in the future? Do you like it or do you not? And from that, you kind of pivot. If you really like it, you might want to look for more opportunities in that space. I know I did. I kind of did the internship like spring or a fall, spring, and a summer internship in like the same company and the same position. And so if you really like it, you might want to do it. You might also want to try and explore. So if it's, yeah.
I think there's just,
the
world is your oyster.
There's short periods of time. It's like generally low commitment compared to like a full-time job, because there's like a clear start and end date.
I think this is an interesting comment. It seems like some people are talking about IE, but this one, IE is tough. All the IEs at Georgia Tech have some crazy internships. I think that's interesting because IE definitely is a lot more math intensive than what you would think. One example I like to talk about is how a simple thing, now correct me if I'm wrong, where IE, and a simple problem in the world may be just a general delivery driver. How do you deliver 10 boxes to 10 different addresses, right? And you might think, what's the shortest distance from house to house? But IE might look at it from a different perspective and through what's called constraint optimization, and try to optimize the delivery path based on maybe the time of day, pedestrian traffic.
There's algorithms.
And so you take something that's seemingly simple and you apply a lot of math to it. And so industrial engineering is actually a lot of
I think the math, in my experience, it depends on what you want, because industrial engineering, you can look at it from the supply chain and logistics perspective, but you also look at it through, like, some universities might have data science specializations or data science opportunities within the School of Industrial Engineering. And so you have that opportunity, you have the logistics, you have the supply chain, you have manufacturing and production. So in terms of creating products and everything like that, and scaling, taking like unique designs that might happen once and scaling to make it happen 1,000 times or whatever. That's also a part of industrial engineering. And then you have like the more business oriented stuff like consulting, which are opportunities for IE.
Opportunity.
It just ultimately depends on like where you end up going. I feel like it's kind of, in terms of how much math you do and what you study and what you focus on, could be like what route you end up wanting to choose down, because it's kind of broad.
Another question was, so there were a couple about IE, so I want to say something about IE. There was one about electrical. What specialty should you go into, or like subfield? I would say within a general undergraduate degree, it's pretty high level. You're exploring controls, signals. You're doing power, so it's you get a taste of everything. You can choose to sort of narrow down a specific area, maybe with electives. But honestly, I would say internships are one way that you can explore different fields. So for me, that's something that I did. Another option is if you just look at different class descriptions, you can kind of see there. Look at different job descriptions, and that might give you an idea. But generally, something I see too is a lot of students tend to go down the path of maybe what their internships were in, but that's not for certain though. Another thing too, question was, is it okay if you only do a internship junior year? So I could say generally, like, if the more internships or co-ops, generally the better. But you also see students who work like an internship, one internship that summer before freshman year, and then they are, that could either like directly lead to a full-time job, or they're successful in getting another opportunity after graduation.
Yeah, and it's your timing, right? And
Yep.
I think that's it. But one of the things that we talk about is looking for opportunities like early
Yes.
in the academic journey. So like freshman year, we both talked about this earlier, getting internships as freshmen. It's possible. I think there's like a general myth where like freshmen can't get internships, or it might not be for them. But in our experience, that wasn't true, because we both got internships. But part of the benefit is if you're a freshman, and let's just say if you get an internship, great. But if you don't, you're already getting familiar, talking about yourself, talking about your resume, doing the elevator pitch, but also going to career fairs. Sometimes there's going to be company reps or company recruiters that go to the same career fair every year at your university. And so you might start to they might start to be familiar if you talk with them every time about how you're growing as a candidate. If you're consistently interested over the years, maybe they're only looking for like some specialty and you end up growing into that role, they might be looking at you. So like there is like a kind of playing out like the career search, where even if you don't get an internship immediately after freshman year, even though you were looking, there could be some benefits later on, just given your familiarity in the recruiting space.
So here's another one about, okay, so how hard is electrical compared to IE? Probably, it depends on the school, but generally electrical is considered a little more tough
Yeah,
than
I
IE.
wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah, IE's electrical. Generally, like at many schools, if you were to say like what's the hardest one, it's probably either going to be electrical or chemical at that school.
Yeah.
But that said, I think they're all very hard, and I think it's no matter, you could take an electrical and have an electrical start taking industrial classes, and they're still going to say these classes are tough.
Yeah, and
So
ultimately, like, what are you when you talk about the hardest major? I think I've typically heard of like electrical. I've also seen some people suggest chemical. In my experience studying industrial engineering, like for me, it's like in terms of the hardest major, what is the point of the question? You can also ask that. Like, what's the point? I think it's an interesting question. I think electrical or chemical is typically here. And I think one of the things with industrial engineering, in my experience, there's very limited labs. And I heard just anecdotally from other majors that labs are going to be pretty difficult. And so if you have less of that with IE, I think that's part of the reason, like, could go into it if E has like a lot more labs, and those tend to be a little bit more difficult, right?
Yeah, I think it's all like difficulty is kind of subjective.
Yeah.
But generally, there are some trends that you see. So one question we had was 4+1. So if you should do a 4+1 master's, one of the benefits is sort of the accelerated timeline. So you just do it and you have that master's done. Another benefit is that maybe you come out with a technical edge, and you also can take advantage of some momentum. So if you are
like really specialized technically,
and there are some jobs that maybe would prefer that. Otherwise, you could be going into that master's with a what is it called? Momentum. Like I said, like if you're really cranking out semester after semester, you then can whip through that master's pretty quick. Otherwise, one of the cons is you're delaying your starting salary, so that is something to take into account. But that master's, depending on your company and role you go into, could put you in another pay band. So maybe you wait, but then you start out a year later earning $15,000 more a year or $10,000.
Perhaps.
That's just generic numbers, not saying that's what it is. Just throwing around arbitrary numbers as to what is maybe possible, but it's impossible to tell exactly what will happen. One of the reasons people will say don't do it is because if you wait and work for a company, your company might have a sort of benefit where they help fully or partially pay. That said, sometimes they like you to stick around working for that company for a few years if they do pay for that. Another one could be reason to maybe wait it out is, again, like you're delaying your salary.
Yeah, and ultimately it depends on the company and like the industry, what companies, and like if you think like that's where you want to go, what types of opportunities do they have, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just
I saw another question about how to get internships like your freshman year when you have limited experience, or like obviously like when you might have less experience or less opportunities for experience than like a sophomore, a junior, or a senior. What do you have to say about that?
So I would say that the number one thing is to not worry about being, so actually a couple different things. One, I would say is don't worry about being not qualified enough, because we just talked about this. You will likely be expected to have to learn things on the job, even if you know how to like maybe work a specific software. You're still going to have to learn new things about like maybe that software, or maybe the specific application. Like you're expected to learn on the job. So don't let the maybe skills and qualifications necessarily frighten you if you don't check all the boxes. Other thing, though, is making sure you do develop experience. Focus on what you could do on campus, whether it's clubs, student organizations, research. If you're working part-time or you have any past part-time work, that belongs on your resume as well.
And then the other thing, too, would be that I would do before interviews or talking at career fairs is doing research on the company, knowing, like, what do they do, what do they offer, and why you would be excited to work there if you are. Right. And then I know my internship offers, like I did research about the company and kind of knew something that I wanted to call out about the company. And so that company research can be like another thing to add that's like a different angle in terms of presenting yourself as a candidate.
And I think just to give some reference to, we are going to have to jump soon. My battery's at like 4% right now. But just to be to give some insight onto like maybe what was on my resume freshman year when I got my offers. I had, what did I have? For the first offer, I had my part-time job at a grocery store. I worked in the produce department. I had a club from high school. I had like an award from high school and a personal project that I had done. So nothing too like extravagant out there. I think if you're first starting out and you're building your resume, like you're a freshman, maybe a sophomore, you can pull from high school a little bit, but with the goal of building more recent and relevant experience on campus. And eventually that older stuff falls off the resume. So that's something that you could do if like you're feeling like your resume is lacking. You could try to do that to add more content to the resume. And even back when I was, even after I had the John Deere and Exxon internship on my resume, I still had an award from high school when I was interviewing at SpaceX and Tesla and got those offers. I still had an award from high school on my resume. So,
okay.
Otherwise, my battery is about to go off, so I'm going to have to end the live now. Are there any others you want to?
We're good.
Well,
thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to go back to one of the posts up on the page and leave your question as a comment there. Like I said, phone battery is at like 3%, so I got to end the live. I hope everybody has a good evening.